Okay, this is the meeting of the Milford Finance Committee, December 11th, 2024 at 7 p.m. Let's start with the approval of the prior minutes that were as of October 10, 2024 that Leanne has prepared and circulated. Any comments? Motion approved by Al, seconded by Brant. And we don't have Zoom access right now. I understand that technical difficulties are being worked on, but because we don't have Zoom at the moment, we do have a quorum. We do not need to take a roll call. So all in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Invitation to speak. No one having been heard. Okay, item number 3. Internal audit review of the school department. Let's start with Zach. Now, let me tell everyone what this is tonight and what this is not. In looking at the annual financial statements that are prepared by the outside auditors for Milford, and frankly for other towns as well, I noticed there's language in there that says that they generally specifically disclaim any review of internal controls. And there's a secondary issue that we've talked about in the past year or two about that we've had the same accountants for a long period of time, and whether we need to change the engagement partner or change the firm and that sort of thing. So we've had some discussions about whether we should take some supplementary processes to just evaluate our internal controls to determine if anything needs to be looked at or improved. This is not a particular issue for the school committee. It's possible that we could do this for other departments. I think we started with schools for a couple of reasons. Number one, the sheer size of the budget. Number two, we understand there's been a fair amount of turnover, so we thought that that might be an appropriate place to start. But I just wanted to lay that foundation. So, Zach, why don't you just tell us?
You teed that up pretty good. So, yeah, just to kind of expand upon that, we know we have Tom Scanlon Associates that's been the audit firm for many years. It's a financial statement audit, so their main objective is to do exactly that, prepare the combined financial statements. That is required for like the level of debt we have in this community. It's not an option. I must have it audited annually. They also conduct the single audit, it's called, which is all federal engagement, all federal funds that are received. If you receive over $5,000, you're required. We receive a heck of a lot more than $5,000 in federal funding. So they do that audit as well. And then every third year, they do the student activity audit. They also review annually our retirement pension system, which, as you know, is separate and apart from the town of Milford, has its own EIN number. Quite clearly, there's an interaction there. We appropriate like $5 million, $6 million a year to the pension system, but that's audited through this firm. It's also audited through the state every 2 years. So actually, next Monday, I'll be dealing with that as the state comes out with follow-ups. To your point, in the annual audit that we have, it does expressly say that they are not making an opinion on our internal controls. However, I do want to say that they test them. They do a lot of testing. They don't come in just to put the financial statements together, even though that's their objective. They have to have some opinion that it's fairly stated and that they're confident behind it. And in doing so, they do a lot of testing. Now, that language is in there. Right? So this is not a point-blank internal control review, and that's what we're talking about now. At this opportunity, I think it'd be wise for Kevin McIntyre to come up and introduce Wen Cobb, who had the luxury of working with for about, 5 months now? Somewhere around there.
Almost.
Now, Zach, before we hear from these other folks, have you given any thought to it? Are we doing this in addition to modification to engagement partners or firms?
Yes.
Or is this in lieu of?
In addition to. So I've been, to that other point, I'm sorry, I overlooked it. I have been in communication with all the not all, but the vast majority of the various auditing firms that are out there. Okay, there's not a lot that do municipalities. There's some large engagement firms, and there's a number of smaller ones. I would call the Scanlon one of the smaller ones. I've communicated with a lot of them. Many of them just don't have interest in it, and the ones that do would literally be 3 to 4 times as expensive as what we're getting now. Do I think there would be a huge change there? No, I don't at all. Their objective would be to put together a financial statement as well. So I'm going to be in front of the selectmen next week, and I'm going to continue to suggest a 3-year contract with Tom Scanlon. This would be in addition to that. I've been communicating with a firm called CLA, Clifton, Larson, and Allen, and they are willing to do this. I haven't gotten to the level of engagement yet, but that's the steps that I'd be looking to do. Why? I think having Scanlon for this many years, yes, you can look at, it's healthy to change, but I'm looking at it the other way. Certainly in a municipality, when you do have a lot of turnover, as we're going to talk about in a minute, they have the institutional knowledge for many, many years. They serve as a consultant to me many times. And again, I really don't see any drastic change from going to another firm. Right now, they're charging us $35,000 a year. I think it's worth it. I think they do a very thorough, good job, and their main objective of getting what we need has always been timely and appropriate. They have a great reputation, so I'm going to suggest to the selectmen that we engage a 3-year contract with Scanlon and Associates.
Okay. So now, for Leanne's purposes, Kevin McIntyre, school superintendent, and I'm sorry, you are?
I'm Wen Cobb. I'm the current school business administrator.
And so Wen started with us July 1st, and she's off to a great start. She's done a great job so far.
Welcome.
Thank you.
The floor is yours if there's anything that you...
One question. You mentioned that it's 3 times the cost. The last time we went over this, there was also a startup amount of money that was going to be required for the new firm to get up to speed.
That's where that 3 times, 4 times
Oh,
would be.
okay.
Yeah,
So it's all in, it'd be 100-some thousand.
yeah, roughly.
Okay, did either of you have anything that you wanted to say before I continue? with
No, I
that?
would say we're here to answer questions.
Oh, okay, great.
I wanted to do an introduction as well.
Yeah, I
This is
think
the
one-
replacement of Kathy Perry. I think everybody on this committee knew Kathy. I think it would be smart for everyone to know Wen.
Agreed.
My experience with her is very intelligent. I like working with her, and I think we have a great opportunity here to kind of look at our internal controls and make it productive and effective for the town, and myself and all of us together.
Yes, David.
So I think this is a fantastic idea. Is there, the school department have an internal control policy in place or a procedure in place, or are we going to create and design one?
There are, you guys can speak to it if you want.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of procedures and internal controls in place, depending on what specifically you're talking about. I think we have a lot of different procedures and processes in place.
Is it written? I mean, is it written, or is it just
Yeah, there's
standard practice?
school committee policies, there's procedures that we follow. I think it's both.
So how about specifically setting up vendors and signing invoices? Can you talk about that policy?
Yeah, do you want to talk about how we do that?
So we have the school committee policies. It's kind of the overall guideline, and we have some internal procedure. Some in writing, some are not. So there are always room for improvement.
But ultimately, we have to follow. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, just me and my team will just work on that.
Okay.
So,
Perfect. So the specific thing that people will be watching for is making sure that somebody can't set up a vendor and then be the sole person who signs off. That's where all the fraud happens, right?
Right.
So they're looking for that to be a control.
so
Okay.
what, I'm sorry,
Frank, my department sets up all the vendors. They just send us all the information. We're setting them up, so there is a second layer.
Perfect. So then you have controls on who can do that and what authority needs to have this? So is that the same person setting them up and then sending the checks?
It's
Perfect.
Someone within my department, we run them through the IRS matching system to make sure they're actually a true company or a true individual. They have to have either an EIN, an FIN, or a foreign ID as well. So they're vetted through the treasurer's office, but they're hiring the vendor then sending us the paperwork. So there is a third way.
Okay, let me start. So I was talking earlier about what this is tonight and what it is not. What tonight is not is the internal audit of the school department. So I don't want to get into a whole, it's a very fair question, Brent, but I don't want to get into a whole panoply of issues. I assume that you're going to be looking at some general internal controls, procurement issues, and anything else that you consider would be useful for
Yeah.
you as a central
And
accountant.
Mr. Chairman, for the record as well, like, obviously, there's an interaction with us on the town side quite clearly, so I envision that this internal control review would also migrate over to my side as well, for lack of a better term.
No, what you just said, we can spend hours going
Yeah,
through detail.
We're not going to go through tonight everything that you are probably going to look at, and we'll talk about later when the work is
I
done.
think the fundamental question is you're saying, Chris, that procurement and AP are not the same person.
Procurement comes through me.
That's what I'm saying, Brownie. It's not one person that does procurement and AP. So you do have a level of
Before we
control.
post any invoices, any larger ones, I do a review to see if they're a state bid vendor, and if they aren't, I review to make sure that they've done the proper procurement quoting to validate, you know.
Yeah, back on the big picture here, I don't want to have a false representation that we don't have internal controls. We take it very, very seriously. Segregation of duty is at the forefront, so we do, but obviously having a third party come in and review or make recommendations, I think, is welcomed at this point.
Yeah, so the purpose of this tonight, putting this on the agenda, is just to make people aware that we're going to be doing some supplemental evaluations and the backdrop to it. Yes.
So I'm just curious what the deliverable is. I mean, is it just an evaluation, or is it they're going to recommend improvements?
I fully expect recommend improvements, and then
So that's the deliverable then, is
Yeah.
what we're doing now, what we could do better or...
we do
or-
better. Yeah, I think all of us are open to do things more effectively and efficiently, and that's definitely the objective.
What's the timing of this?
Probably in the next couple of months.
Thank you.
Next couple of minutes to start, to finish?
to start.
To start, okay.
Exactly. This work you're describing, it's just specific to the schools, right?
As I mentioned, it's likely going to fall, it's going to fall into my arena too, because we interact with, you just heard my town accountant, treasurer speaking to internal control, so it naturally must, you know?
That's what, that's
But,
where I was going
and
with it.
if you think, like, oh, you're doing the police and fire and whatnot, it's a massive, massive operation at the school. Police, fire, library, everything else filters through the town. So, and we are one town here. I hate saying like school versus town, but it is. When is the equivalent of me at the school department? You know, obviously we have interactions, and we just want to see if we can smooth
You're going
things
to
out
take best
better.
practices that you develop at the school and spread that out in the municipal side.
Yes, yes. And again, I think we do a pretty good job, but again, I want to make sure, like, could we do things better and more efficiently? Could. We'll
Just
see.
because you get an A doesn't mean you can't shoot for an A+.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, any other questions for these folks? All right, thank you for coming in.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Glenn, welcome.
You'll be spending a lot of time with her over the next few months.
How can I find the agenda on here? Stuff that goes back to 2016, but I can't get the agenda. Hold on. Personal mail.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Actually, let's do this. Divide and conquer, here we go. Well, they're passing that out.
Thank you.
Background. Andy, the chairman asked me to bring in our investment advisors.
Hold on one second. So Leanne,
Thank you.
I just want to make sure for the minutes, we have Chris Pila, who's the town treasurer, And these are the...
Brian,
I always say Peter.
I don't know.
Can I just... a new... I'm going to keep calling you that, no matter what.
That's all right. I'll keep
you remind me.
That's all right. We have Brian Jamros from Bartholomew and Company, and Kathleen, I'm going to butcher her last name, so I'm just going to let her say it,
Saganowitz.
from Bartholomew and Company as well.
Okay. Do you folks have cards for purposes of the minutes?
Who's taking the minutes?
Leanne.
Thank you, Leanne. I have to do the minutes on my finance committee.
I'll grab one.
I appreciate that.
On my way out.
So,
Thank you.
as I started to say a couple months ago, the chair asked me to have our investment advisors come in to give a brief overview of how our stabilization and OPEB monies are invested. So our goals and objectives here tonight, they're going to give you a brief little overview. They'll give you a market overview, and then we'll talk about our portfolio overview. Any questions, the three of us can answer. Both field questions.
And OPEB, for everyone's benefit, is
Other post-employment benefits?
for retirees.
Yes.
Retiree benefits, yeah.
Brian? Kathleen?
As they go through, it would be helpful if you can put in perspective, how is Milford doing compared to the general? Because, we always get hit with, oh, we're terrible, we're not doing enough. But then when you ask, well, how are the other towns around us doing? You get a better perspective.
Yep. Bill?
I thought we had been doing good. We've been doing good.
Go ahead, Brian.
Excellent. Good
The floor is
evening.
yours, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it. My name's Brian Jamros, and this is Kathleen Glowacki. I've called her Kathleen Glowacki for the last 9.5 years. Forgive me, she just got married over the summer. Thank you so much. We've been working with Bartholomew and Company is an independent investment firm located out of Worcester, Massachusetts, centrally located. We're about a $5 billion company. A little over $3 billion of it is inside the municipal space. What does that mean? $3 billion represents about 330 municipal entities throughout primarily in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have 4 in Maine, 1 in Rhode Island, and 1 in New Hampshire, primarily because people retired in their roles in Mass and moved up or moved on, and so we had a relationship with them. Part of our success is we have 2 former municipal employees on staff. We started with Chuck Patterson 23 years ago. He married the investment world with the municipal experience. He was a former treasurer in the town of Shrewsbury. Prior to that, he was in Worcester, and he married his municipal experience with the experience of the investment world. So with that said, that was a quick introduction. There's a big team of people behind us as well. Kathleen and I we're both outside advisors. There's 3 others that work with us, so there's a total of 5 outside investment advisors. We have an internal team of 4 for the servicing staff to help Chris and his team doing the transfers and such. And then we have an internal investment management team, so when we're out talking to you or other clients, we have people behind the scenes putting the money to work. That's kind of the brief overview. With your package, the first 2 things I'd like to go over quickly is the 3 buckets of monies. And then after that is the list of legal lists of investments, otherwise known legal list of investments. We'll talk about that in a minute. If you could, though, the 3 buckets of monies. There's really 3 buckets of monies under the Mass General laws. The first bucket of money is dictated by Mass General Law, Chapter 4455, which states that you can invest in money markets, CDs up to 3 years, treasuries up to a year, and agencies up to a year. You can't invest in credit unions, even though they may have the better rate, and they just won't allow it. It's just against the law, okay? I can tell you the reason behind that later if you want. That incorporates your general funds, your opera funds, your bond proceeds, payroll payables, and operating funds. The next bucket of money is Chapter 4454, and that's the legal list of investments. That's the attachment I sent. We'll go over that in a minute, but let's just go through that. That incorporates your trust funds, cemetery perpetual care, stabilization funds, community preservation funds, scholarship funds, depreciation funds, and library funds. That was really dictated for several years, actually for right up until August of 2023, under the legal list of investments. If your treasurer went off that list, let's say he said we should invest in Bed Bath & Beyond, and of course they went out of business, he would be personally liable. It wouldn't fall under his bond. He'd have to write a check for any of the loss of that fund. So it's very strict. Your auditors would pick up on that, give you a little nasty gram note at the end of the year saying, hey, you're off the legal list. So they're all following those rules. Up until recent, August 2023, you'll see those highlighted ones, the trust funds, cemetery perpetual care, scholarship funds, and library funds. Your town did take a local adoption to move those to prudent investor, which we just executed in the last day or two. We transferred those over. And then OPEB, which you do have with us as well, is the other post-employment benefits. Just for clarity, that is for the retirees, as the chair said, retirees' health benefits versus pensions is for their income. So those can be invested under Chapter 203C. If you're in the private sector, that would be how you can invest in your 403K, 401K, or your 457 if you're in the municipal space.
So I'm sorry, you said the OPEB, that's only for the health benefits?
That's only for the health benefits, correct.
Retirement benefits?
Retirees' health benefits, correct.
That's in the PIRAC? Is that what that is?
That PIRAC's the governing body that's in PRIM, which is the Pension Retirement Investment Management Team. That's overseen by the state. There's a board that meets quarterly. Yep.
Okay.
So far, so good?
Okay, excellent. I'm just trying to honor your time. I know you have a lot of things going. So we're going to go, if you have any questions, please stop me along the way. I'm just going to go into the bucket number 2 monies, which is your stabilization. By the way, stabilization has to fall under that legal list of investments. I know it's going to look archaic. If you take a look, it hasn't really changed in over 30 years. If anything, companies keep getting taken off. There's a couple of ways that you can put companies on the legal list. Ironically, you can do it with 3 presidents of a credit union. They're not inclined to do so since they can't take your deposits. So forget that. That's off the list. Or companies can solicit the state and see if they can get on the legal list. They're not out there going to do that, though. So it really hasn't moved too much.
No Bitcoin.
No Bitcoin. Well, and quite frankly, in light of what you've gone through recently, when the criminals are asking for Bitcoin, I don't know if I really want to invest the money in Bitcoin, right? If you want to do that personally, go ahead, but definitely not in the municipal space. It's just not prudent. So I'm not telling you what to do personally. I'm just saying, as far as municipal, no Bitcoin, no penny stock, okay? Okay, yeah, good point. Thank you for bringing it up. A couple of years ago, everybody was asking us about, can we invest in Bitcoin? We're like, no. So, okay. Any questions on the legal list of investments? Or we can go right into, there's basically 22 companies on the legal list of investments that we can invest in. We can invest in their equity or their stock, and we can invest in their bonds, okay? There's 22 companies. They're the big blue chip companies. They're the PepsiCos, the McDonald's, Hewlett-Packard, Altria, stuff like that, okay? There's a full list inside this package. Okay, so let's start with the bucket. Yes, go ahead.
There is one company we do not currently have in our portfolio that's on the legal list. It's GE. We've gotten away from them over the last couple of years. They can give you an insight to why we've gotten away with it, but we just they felt that the company was not performing enough for us to be investing in them. So that's one company that you won't see in our portfolio.
So that leaves us to 21 companies. GE, unfortunately, when my grandparents were around, they were getting paychecks from it. And then the last couple of years when they were restructuring, you would get less than, not much on a dividend payment on that with their restructuring, okay? So we're going to start, I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen in a minute. We're going to start with the bucket number 2, your stabilization monies, okay? That is invested in the legal list. It's very conservative.
I have a quick question. You mentioned you have 330 municipalities that you're working with. That's out of 350?
Yeah, let me clarify that. 330 municipal entities. So it's probably a little over 220 cities and towns, but we have regional school districts, water districts.
It just seemed like a very high percentage of 330 and 350.
Yeah, we really do have we're one of the bigger players in the space, quite honestly, not because of our personalities, although if you didn't like us, you'd kick us out. But really it has to do with, in my opinion, the understanding of your world. We understand it in and out because of our municipal, Chuck Patterson, I'll give him the credit, who came over 23 years ago and married the investment world with the municipal world with the investment world. Anytime our company makes a decision, we run it through the filters of the municipal. How is this going to impact the treasurers? What's Mass General Law? He's like the Google for Mass General Law. If we have a question, Chuck, what is it? Now, we all know it now because we've been trained over the last, I've been there 9.5 years, Kathleen as well, and our whole team has been trained, everybody on the team that deals with your town's funds has been trained on the municipal space. But yeah, we do quite a bit.
Tell us what the exposure is to OPEB somewhere in this,
We will, yes.
how we're lining up against other towns.
Absolutely.
Now, shut up.
No, that's okay. Good question. I didn't forget about it. We will do that. Is it okay if we go through the stabilization bucket number 2? Then
do that,
Okay,
yeah.
excellent. So stabilization in this report, this is the 1130 report. Because you went through that cybercrime attack, ransomware, there is 2 lines on here on the first page. The second line,
Easy on that.
what's that?
Easy on the cyber.
Oh, sorry. The attack. The reason why there's two accounts is because the one account, we wanted to take precautionary measures and just close it, get rid of it. If anybody has access to your account, we just wanted to get rid of that. So the balance of the 1,622.79 is really just because that's a residual from the old account, okay? I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen, and we're going to go through a quick review. Yes?
So your corporate, I guess, stocks that you invest in, is there any corporate governance that you don't, because of their corporate governance, you won't invest in them? You look at the companies and look at their, like, terrorism and things like that, or international, or anything like that?
We do. So GE was an example. Another one was Wells Fargo. So when they were, for example, from a governance perspective, this was not good. They were opening up all of those fake accounts. And so the day that news broke, we sold that. And so, we'll do things like that. We will monitor, but so it has to be typically something pretty egregious. But because of the restrictions of the legal list, we'll sometimes have, we'll have a school district, for example, who will say, we don't want to invest in Altria because it's tobacco. And so at a certain point, you start removing things for reasons that are a little bit arbitrary. So we try not to do that, is kind of my point. But if there's something much more extreme going on with the company, we will remove it or add it back, if something like GE wouldn't be maybe off the table forever. So does that sort of...
Yeah, no, that answers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So for the sake of time, I won't go through every single page here, but if there are questions along the way, let us know. But for the stabilization account, this will be very different from the OPEB. At this point, as you can see on page 2, on the top left-hand side, what we can invest in this portfolio: corporate bonds, treasuries, agencies, CDs, which we don't purchase at this point, and common stock, those 22-ish companies we were talking about. And so right now we have, as you can see, 13.59% in common stock. The rest is in bonds. Just because of the nature of stabilization, it can be voted out. It's really emergency money, rainy day money, however you want really to describe that. So that's how it's composed right now. And so what I'll say on the investment team side, what they're doing all the time is they're just looking at the whole universe of what we can purchase and what looks the most attractive. So for example, lately, treasuries have been quite high. They were paying 5%, for the safest investment really in the world. So we've been buying more and more treasuries. So, they'll go in there and they'll try to be as creative as they can based on what we can do with such a restrictive list.
So are these yields annualized yields?
So no, so I'll show you a better measure, but these are just current yields as of the day we printed this, 11/30, based on that day's price.
Okay.
So I'll show you something better, because in a lot of cases, we don't just purchase a bond just for the yield. Sometimes we'll purchase a bond if it makes sense at, say, $80 and it matures at $100. So you get income along the way and then a gain at the end. You won't see that there. It's kind of convoluted. I'll show you a better number. But that's just a point in time.
Chris, this 52 million, is that what we call stabilization and what we call the short-term, long-term?
That's everything. It's including your sewer, it's including the capital, the two liability funds as well, the municipal property and the liability fund. That's all included in this 52 million.
Okay, because I was trying to figure out how that reconciled with our two main stabilizations, which are only like
And you got
40 million.
And you got to remember, this 52 million is based off of market value. When we present you stuff, quarterly stuff, we're presenting at a cash value basis because we only book our market value at the end of the year.
It just seemed very high to me.
Yep, that's because one, it's at market value and it's encumbering all the 6 funds we have. So the sewer, the long-term capital, the regular stabilization, the dental liability claims.
You've answered it. That makes sense.
So this is as of 11/30,
As
Yes.
of like
market value.
Yes.
Yep.
Page 3, just very quickly on the left-hand side of page 3, this is really, speaking of market value, this is really showing you the market value and all of the activity going back to 2001. We've had this portfolio for that long. So you can see contributions, withdrawals, realized and unrealized gains, dividends, management fees to our firm. So all of that said, since 2001, the portfolio's had a total gain of just over 14.8 million. So an annualized return, market value return of 2.93%, and that's net of fees. And that's, I would say, very typical. It's probably even on the higher side for stabilization accounts just because of the time frame. But again, remember, this is very conservative money. Oh, yeah, sure.
The return,
Yes.
annualized return, 2.93, goes back to 2001,
Yes.
and that's the annualized return per year.
Yes, exactly. So the line above that is, if you looked at returns since 2001 to 2024 without annualizing it, so 98, if you can see that there. But we talk about averaging that, basically, of
That's over 23 years.
Over 23 years, you doubled.
It was okay.
Yes, exactly.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So I'm curious, how often do you rebalance? And like, what happens if, like, say, if a stock just goes under? Does like bells and whistles go off and you just like drop it quickly, or how does that work?
It depends why. Especially in this account, I'll say for the OPEB, we're rebalancing a lot more often, and we'll talk about that. That's prudent. You can invest in anything in the world. Here, it's, yes, we have a watch list. We're watching the stocks. If something kind of crosses a line we think is too far, we'll look into why. Typically, we won't sell it immediately without knowing what's going on necessarily, but it is being watched all the time. But I'll say for this, because we're buying individual bonds, we usually want them to go to maturity, and that's 90%-ish of the portfolio. We're not really buying and selling bonds, we kind of buy and hold. Here, OPEB's different, that we're trading quite a bit more, yeah.
So we had a meeting back in July where we went through the permitted investments in detail.
Correct.
And I was frankly surprised to see how limited the state investments are, for a variety of reasons. Number one, they limit the entities that you can go into, and they limit the sectors.
Yeah.
And, some people may ask you, well, why isn't the return higher? I'm a bankruptcy lawyer, so I'm more thinking about the downside risk. And one of the things I noticed, and if you had a stagflationary environment where bonds and stocks were both declining, or worse, a hyperinflation environment or something like that, it seems to me that the permitted investment list really curtails. You don't really have flexibility to go into commodities or precious metals or real estate or any of those things. Now, you haven't really had to deal with that in the last 25 years.
Correct.
But I'm just curious as to what you think you would do if you saw that kind of environment coming up. I mean, I do get nervous about the nosebleed territories of the markets. People are hoping the interest rates are going down, but, I'm not quite sure that that's where it's going to end up at the end of the day. So I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, first of all, before Kathleen answers it, there's about 13% equity in this portfolio.
I saw.
Just so the board knows, through the chair, if I could.
Yeah.
So it's ultra-conservative. Why? Because it's your stabilization funds. The goal for these funds has always been to keep it above the, better money markets and CDs out there across the state. Net of fees, so the treasurer can focus on the other tasks that they have in hand. It's very super restrictive, Chairman. If you think this is restrictive, you should see the states. They don't allow equity at all, zero. And we have some state agencies where 100% fixed income. That's it.
Have your folks ever talked to the state? I know that we've talked to Chris about potentially trying to organize a broader, certainly not reckless, but there are more sectors than what are being represented, right?
So it's been through the MCTA. It's been talked about for 10 years. The legal list change I talked to you about on August of 2023 took 10 years to get through, if not more. The sad thing is, I did talk to Tony, one of the people from the DOR. They don't understand it as much, unfortunately. So when we went to him and we said, hey, this is when, and I had the personal conversation with Tony from the DOR. I said, why is your OPEB, after you adopted it with 32B Section 20 after November 7th of 2016, why did it automatically default to the legal list? He goes, well, we don't want to get in Bitcoin. We don't want to invest in penny stock. I said, no, that's not the understanding, Tony. And they just don't have a concept, unfortunately, some of them.
So that answers the next question. So the OPEB is now also under the umbrella of the state permitted list?
No, it's not. You took the vote the right way. So it's a two-part vote. The earlier vote, we're getting into some details, and I apologize, but before November 7th of 2016, it automatically defaulted to the Prudent Investor Chapter 203C. After the Modernization Act change, it defaulted to the legal list unless you took a second part vote, which you did on May 24th of 21.
So the town overrode that?
Yeah, we had we looked at it with the advice of our team. We looked at the differences, and we did adopt the law that allows us to be prudent on that.
And so this is what are the restrictions for OPEB then?
203C, just like you invest your 401k or your 457. It's wide open, minus Bitcoin and penny stocks.
Okay.
I only shared that point to you so that way you could understand the mindset.
Yeah.
But 99.9% of all the OPEB portfolios are Chapter 203C. It just took a second part vote by town meeting vote.
I see.
Okay.
So, and just to clarify, OPEB is not the only fund that you can be a prudent investor on. They just allowed us to go to some of our trust funds, and we did adopt that back in October town meeting, I believe, or May town meeting of this year. So our portfolio for our trust funds, which you don't have in front of us because it's just mostly scholarships and some cemetery funds and all that, so it's not really worth discussing over it. We moved it to the prudent investor, so that should start earning just a little bit more than it was before, and we have some flexibility there, but there's still restrictions on that too. They aren't talking about letting treasurer collectors do prudent investor on stabilization. I don't know if that's ever going to come. Some of the conversations we've had, we would like it, but again, it's out of our hands, and we try, but I don't think it's got enough backing yet to happen. So maybe 5 years from now, it will probably.
Okay, so is there anything you want to tell us about the OPEB portfolio?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Switching gears. So the OPEB portfolio is quite different. It can be invested under Chapter 203C. like any prudent person can do. There have been some changes, and as Kathleen starts going over this, I just want to, before she does that, I want to give you some of the changes. This account initially started with a 60/40 exposure early on. This account has been around since October of 2011, so you were early adopters as a town. A lot of people didn't think OPEB was a real thing and it was going to go away, but sometime between 2017 and 2018, I can't remember which now, but GASB came out and made it a liability on your balance sheet. Before it was just a footnote, but then GASB, Government Accounting Standards Board, said, no, this is a real liability. We're putting it on your balance sheet. You owe the money. So then you guys, with you guys being the town, were early adopters of it. So that you were ahead of the curve. Most people didn't start it until much later, 2015, 2016, and then really aggressively doing it in 2018. Okay?
What is our exposure?
Yeah, let's go through that. Exposure in terms of equity exposure, you start off at 60/40. Now you're at a 70/30 portfolio. That changed on 12/19 of 2017. We've added private markets, including private equity, real estate, and private credit, which represents about 13% of the total account. I'll let Kathleen go quickly. You want to go through quickly?
I think he means the
I think
liability.
you want the liability.
Yeah.
So
the liability.
So
Sorry.
our last audit that we just had, we are currently in an audit period right now. He hasn't got me the report back yet, but our last audit, which was in 2022, was $84 million. And we have $12 million in there, so your exposure is $72 million. A liability.
But that's debt that's going to be paid over
Yeah, so
decades.
that's, we have a funding schedule. We're required to have a funding schedule. We, as you know, in our budget, put $600,000 a year that goes into this account. That funding schedule goes out, I think, to, I believe it was 2047. That's going to change. It changes based off of the investment factor that we can use each year. Sometimes it goes up and it drops down your liability. When it goes down, it brings it back up.
We had an actuarial report a few years ago.
Yep, you'll get that. I haven't got that yet.
And so that's when we determined there was an underfunding and we had to make these contributions from here until 2038 or something like that. Is that,
Oh, so
is that something different?
You have two of them. You have that on the retirement side, which is
the pension.
which is the
That's a pension.
pension.
The major difference there is we do what's it's called pay as you go.
Right.
So when we budget in the 914 accounts, I'll go over later, we have retiree, we pay for those benefits. So that's why you've always heard me talk negatively to it. I realize that it is a GASB, it is going on the balance sheet, but what drives me crazy is we pay as we go. So instead of being asked to build up this fund just to offset the liability on the other side, like, I don't know when we're going to actually use it.
And to Zach's point, I believe 3 years ago, it could be even a little bit more than that, we re-adopted our OPEB fund to be a working expendable fund. So that was at the advice of our actuary and our advice at our investment team. So eventually, we can start withdrawing from this fund to pay some of these expenses he's talking about. We haven't got there yet. I'm not sure if we'll get there or when we'll get there. That's probably a conversation myself and Zach and Tom will have internally before we come up with a plan there.
Does GASB require a short-term liability for a year, like notes do? Because could you define what your deficit or excess is for a year? There's $12 million against what you think you're going to spend out for the next fiscal year. Is that possible?
That's more of an accounting. I'm not.
You know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're talking about.
Because on the balance sheet, liabilities, you have a short-term liability and a long-term liability. Do we know what the short-term liability is?
Budget, pay as we go.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, the short-term liability is the pay-as-you-go. This is the long-term.
This is the okay. So the $12 million represents a long-term liability then?
No, that's your funding.
That's my cash, right?
$84 million is your liability.
Yeah.
Right, of that 84, how much we think we're going to spend in the next fiscal year? I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Does the 12 million cover what we're going to spend in the next fiscal year?
No. We don't even touch that.
Oh, you don't touch it?
Because it's offsetting the 80 million, so we appropriate in 914 health insurance department for retired.
Oh, so it comes out of the operating budget or whatever?
Yeah, we don't touch the 12 million.
No, you don't touch this cash?
Not yet. If we,
All right.
as we,
So we're building it up to the 84 is what you're trying to say?
So we have a cushion of about,
It'll keep full, it'll keep going.
we have a cushion of about 20%, 12 million out of 84. How does that compare to towns around us?
I have your answer. I know you asked for that first. So this is just from one actuary, one of the leading actuaries that deals with a lot of communities within the state, Odyssey. And according to his report, now bear in mind this is dated 12/31 of 2023, so all this is dated. This hasn't been refreshed. It will be shortly. But according to that data in your report, you are 14% funded according to the current calculation. With that said, comparing to other towns, this is with his client base, of course, but it's a good sample. He deals with 34 or 5 states. It is at, excuse me, that much smaller. You're about 65 percentile compared to the other communities. So you're at 14%, but you're in the 65 percentile.
And that's to towns, so
Yeah.
cities are even less funded, but for a town.
No, but we can't compare ourselves to Boston.
Right. I just want to clarify, that's all just towns.
so if you compare yourself to the surrounding towns, you're probably one of the highest ones. I don't even think some of the surrounding towns here are even following the current law in funding each year. So,
Yeah, and this is building up a cushion. For David's point, there's no reduction in this fund annually.
no.
We pay for that out of our ops budget.
Right, but eventually there's going to be a time where you're going to have to make the switch.
Why?
There may be a time.
Okay.
I'm going to go through some numbers quickly, if that's okay.
Go ahead, David.
Light of time, and then I'm going to have Kathleen answer any holdings questions. So let's just remember this, the portfolio didn't always start. It started initially at a 60-40, change in 2017, and a 70-30. We've added private equity and private markets in there. Let's go to page 3 of 11. I'm going to quickly go through this if I could. On the right-hand side, you'll see on page 3 of 11, on the right-hand side, you'll see this fiscal year, the last 4 months, it's been a return of 5.13 or an increase after fees of 585. Take a look at the left-hand side of this. The total contributions that the town has made in this portfolio is $7,445,79. There was a withdrawal there there was a transaction there that happened. But bottom line is the total gain after fee is $4,530,337.59, or a 6.51% return year after year since 2011.
We had to close the accounts due to what happened.
Okay, so
And so
it was an
it's going in and out.
Okay, so
There's a little confusion there because of we had to change the accounts.
That's
I
fine. It
apologize.
just wasn't a real withdrawal, though.
No, it's not a real withdrawal, but
The TWR total
Time-weighted return.
time-weighted return? Okay.
And as you can see on the bottom page, the brown line represents the money you put in, and the blue line represents the market value. The next page, oh, I see how they did it. So this, we haven't done this in a while, split up the account right back to back like this, but this is the second half of the new account. Not much activity. We just switched this over on 11/19. You're going to really see the history on the previous page, okay? The next page, 5 of 11, let's go to the one-year number, your portfolio in review. Is that the combined?
Benchmarks are wrong.
The benchmarks are wrong. We'll fix the benchmarks. We just made all these changes to this account because we moved pretty quickly on behalf of the town because of the incident that happened. We'll fix this accordingly. But the 1 year is at 18.64, which is the last 12 trailing months, okay? I'll send an updated version of this with the updated benchmarks. Since inception, 661, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Next page will give a clearer picture. 6 of 11, basically, The total, you'll see this on a calendar year basis now, all the way back to 2011, with your returns double digits. As Kathleen always says, don't expect a double digits every year. This is a portfolio that we're trying to achieve a 6.5% to 7% return. Still municipal funds, and we're still trying to be mindful of that.
What's the alternative category? It's, I'm back on page.
Yeah, well, let's go to holdings, if we could. Page of page 8 of 11. We'll go right into that, and I'll turn it over to Kathleen. She's going to go over the alternatives for you. Right?
Yeah, so because the OPEB follows the prudent investor rule, we can, as we kind of belabored, we can invest in anything. So here we have a globally diversified portfolio because your liability is so high. So we want this to grow. It's at 70% equity, all of that. So we also include a sleeve of alternatives. And really what alternatives are is kind of a cop-out answer, but it's anything that isn't a stock or a bond. And so the real reason we include those is because they behave differently than the rest of the market. And so what we tend to say is, for us, especially because these are municipal funds, it's in our blood, that if the market is down a lot, we don't want to be as down as the rest of the market. And so your alternatives should help kind of buffer in those more difficult times. So what they are, just very quickly, we have private equity, real estate, we have a managed futures. You'll see the bottom one. That's your commodities, so basket of different commodities. And we have private credit. And so we include those, like I said, because they behave differently, but also, very importantly, when it comes to your actuarial study, your actuary is looking at all these holdings, looking at the investment policy, and projecting out long-term returns so they can come to that discount rate and that unfunded liability. And so private equity, for example, will have the highest long-term projected return. And so when you get credit for owning some of these things, it will bring down your liability. So, a couple different reasons why we own them. But that's your basket there, and I'll say based on the investment policy, which we didn't talk too much about, but we have investment policies for all of your funds. Your target to alternatives is 20%, and you're at about 19%.
Any other questions?
I was just going to ask if there are any questions.
Through the chair, if I may, we do meet with your finance team throughout the year, give them an update, do market reviews. We also do a review report. We help them with trust documents, IPSs along the way. We're an extension of their office. We really work for them. So whatever they need, we put together. So it's on a regular basis.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good piece of information, it really is.
Yeah,
It took me a little longer to dig through it.
There's a lot of info.
I'll be calling Chris.
We talk about it every day, so we can give you as much detail as you want.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Wow, that's a lot to digest. Jen? A lot to digest. It's a lot.
You guys want to send these around?
Was this another? Oh, okay. You're just sitting a little closer. Here you go.
I don't want to get in front of their faces.
Read, more reading.
Okay, next on the agenda, first let's introduce our guest,
Hi, I'm Jen Sklar. I'm the Assessor Administrator.
Jen Sklar. Thank you, Jen. So the topic here is the tax rates and classifications. We actually did a detailed discussion of how the taxes are calculated back in September, I think it was. And I understand that when you go to the Select Board, this is the report that was presented, and I was pointing out that I thought there was a wealth of information in here, which I appreciate. And there are two things in particular I wanted to talk a little bit about. The first thing is,
What page?
well, I don't see page numbers, but I'm 4 from the back.
Okay, you went pretty quick, Bruce.
Excuse my notes. But, so apparently there's something called a small commercial exemption that's available. Only 14 towns take advantage of it, but I thought that this exemption and the one on the next page deserved a little bit of discussion for people on this committee to understand what they are and what the impacts could be. So as I understand this one, this would be a 10% exemption for small businesses to effectively reduce their tax liability.
Property owners, not the business. That's a very...
property owners.
Yeah, big distinction.
The landlord, okay, fair point, fair
Say that
point.
again, please?
The property owner,
Not the
not the
business entity.
that's in it. That's right.
Ooh, that's an interesting,
So you would hope that there'd be some sort of knockoff effect on the rents or whatever, but no
But
guarantee.
yeah,
And so I was just wondering if you or anyone have ever done any analysis of what this would look like in terms of the benefit to the small businesses and, well, the small landlords, I guess, theoretically, and what the effect would be on the larger businesses. Because we have these exemptions available, and I don't know what's gone on in the select board meetings, if there's been any real analysis of this.
I don't know that there's been a lot of detailed information presented to them in recent years, but before this classification hearing, when we give them this packet that you're referring to, we also give them a separate memo, and that memo is only to do with small commercial exemption. And that memo is just kind of a reminder, a refresher of what it all entails and who could qualify. And then we give them kind of a sampling of, a couple of various properties at different value points and what the impacts would be for them. So they get that
we
as
get a
well.
copy of that?
You certainly can have a copy of this. I don't have copies for everybody here tonight. but I
Shoot us an email. Shoot me an email.
Shoot you an email?
Yeah, that'd be
Certainly
great.
can. So we give them, like for this year here, just some of the scenarios were, like a lower valued eligible property valued at $250,000. If you went to the 10%, because it's up to 10, it doesn't have to be the full 10. It could be anywhere between, 1 and 10. So at the 10% exemption, they'd save $550 on the real estate tax bill.
Okay.
Okay? And then it goes...
That's off a total bill of 5,000, or is that?
So it's, let's see, $5,256.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
10% reduction, okay.
what page are you on?
You're not going to see these numbers. This goes to the selectmen in the memo. They get separate from the presentation. I'll email this to
She's going
you.
to send it out.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Question.
Yeah.
If you give an exemption to a small business, who picks up the $500? Is it the bigger businesses, or does it get spread out again between homeowners and business?
So essentially, if the small commercial exemption were to be adopted, we would go from our dual tax rate to 3. We would have 3 tax rates. So the residential stays the same, the personal property stays the same, and the commercial industrial rate absorbs
So the bigger businesses
that.
would pick up what you
Higher
give.
valued commercial properties and any other properties that don't have small businesses occupying their space.
So to answer Al's question, the shortfall would be picked up, it wouldn't be spread equally to all asset bases, it would just be to the business.
To commercial and industrial real estate.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we don't do this now. We don't.
We don't. No.
We don't, but I thought it was worth a discussion to understand how this would work.
Okay.
Because-
That's,
No, my question was, if it's adopted, and you have $500 to that one property, where does it go?
Right.
where's the $500
It
get?
goes to the
It goes to the EMCs and
larger
those water.
valued properties.
Yeah.
And,
It
yes,
would be
Paul.
shifted to the other commercial properties,
Other
right?
commercial and industrial.
Commercial and industrial, so, the big players.
Not even just the big ones, but even if it's a small one that doesn't have a business in it with 10 or less employees. That's the caveat to this. You have to have a business that has less than 10 employees that are certified through the Department of Unemployment and Training, which also excludes, by the way, if you're a self-employed and you don't pay in the Department of Unemployment and Training doesn't have you on their list, you don't qualify either. So you could be a business of one,
So it
and
could-
you don't get it.
it
and
could
you
affect
be
a
anything
small
10 or more, and they won't get
A
it.
medium business.
Yeah.
It could affect a repair shop with
Right.
20 employees.
Yep.
Jennifer, could you send out those caveats too?
Yes.
I'd be curious to see those.
Yes, Mike?
Interesting line here about if a multi-tenant property, all the employers must qualify. So if you have a strip mall with 4 small businesses and 1 outside of this realm, it kills the whole property.
You got it. You got it. Yeah.
Paul, did you?
Just a theoretical question. What if I owned 5 $500,000 corner markets in the town? So in total, I have, $2.5 million worth of property and, however many employees, but each one of them is small. Would all of the aggregate that I all own be taken into consideration, or just for each one of them individually, if it's supposed to be for a small business?
I think it's each property is looked at with who the occupant is for that one.
Okay, so,
Chairman.
yes, Brian?
Just a question. On the towns that do it, do you have any data around what percentage of these businesses under 10 employees that would qualify are actually own the property as well? I have this bias to assume that it's probably a low probability, a low percentage of small businesses that are emerging that have 5 employees start by buying the building.
Yeah.
But it's my bias, right? So I'm wondering if there's any data behind that, or do you have
So
any?
these other communities, I
Yeah.
don't. No, I don't.
Do you know anything
But I could
about
probably,
in town Milford then?
as far as how many commercial.
I'm trying to figure out,
properties?
does something like this benefit the small businesses that are trying to build, or does it really just benefit the
So you're
landlord?
saying if we implemented it, do we know what the?
My guess is it's the
how
landlord.
benefits would be spread out?
It's the property owner.
Right, but I'm guessing that's not the same person.
You don't know.
Right, well, that's why I'm asking if there's any
That's the
data
question.
around that, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're imagining yourself starting a small business, the first thing you wouldn't do is buy the building.
Right, right.
You had 5 employees to
You have the money.
Right,
Which then you're not getting the benefit.
right.
And sometimes that's a moving target, because we are talking about the smaller businesses, and a lot of times we're picking them up, and as fast as we're picking up a new business that comes in that's a smaller business, they're gone. So there's a lot of movement there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, so we'll look forward to that. I'll circulate the email if you send it to me. Now, the next page, now this one really intrigued me. We can exempt 35% of the assessed value of residential properties used as the principal residence. And so I guess the same questions would apply here, is that, do we know what the dollar impact of that would be, and where would that burden then be shifted to? Because in this document, it says it's shifted to apartments, I get that, residential properties not occupied by the owner, okay, and then higher valued homes, I'm not sure I understood that connection, because presumably everybody is still at the same assessments, but if you could elaborate on all that?
Sure. So again, it's up to 35. The DOR actually has a really nice little worksheet or tool that's out there that anyone can use, and you can say, if I adopt a 20% residential exemption, what's that breaking point between who saves and who makes up the difference, because it stays within the same class, right? So the residential class that's getting the exemption for the ones that qualify, the rest of the residential class is making up the difference.
Now it'd be renters, basically. 'Cause we'd
It'd be
ask them to
anybody.
rent basically immediately, right?
Well, no, so what happens is, and I can send this to you as well, but, so lower valued properties will benefit, right?
Yeah.
Higher the value goes, that's where it shifts. So there's that cutoff point. You have your average assessed value. That's how we determine what the percentage of exemption, right? So this year, for example, it's about 500,000 for an average assessed value, right? So then you say you come up with what your exemption percent is going to be, 10, 20, 35. You get your amount. That fixed amount is the same amount that everybody gets, because it's based on an average. So as the value climbs, they get less and less of that break. And then when it gets past that tipping point, those are the rest of the people that now are going to pay more that year, because the tax rate shifts for all residential property. They get the exemption, but they're now getting it at a higher tax rate.
Now, in your handy tools there, do you have a sheet where you do this analysis as well?
I do. Luckily, it used to be we used to have to do it ourselves, but now that the DOR has it's easy. You just go on, anyone could go on and plug in the numbers. But the tipping point, just as an example, on a 20% exemption, residential exemption, the tipping point is at a property value of like $637,000. So anybody under that would get something less, and everybody over that would pay more.
You'd pay more.
Right, right.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I jumped to rentals because
I'm sorry.
you talked about property had to be used by the principal, by the owner. So then what about if I owned a rental property, right? I imagine this wouldn't qualify for the rental property, right? Because it's not the principal residence of the owner, right?
If you're renting it,
No, I'm the owner. If I own a rental property, I wouldn't get this exemption because this is only for
Occupied, owner occupied.
But I would also get the increase. Wouldn't the increase go to some of those rental properties?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So then it would go right into the rents, is what I was jumping to before, right? Because all the rental properties would immediately have an increase.
Right. You're saying that because they'd be higher value properties?
Because they won't get the exemption and the
tax rate goes up.
To take this, if peanut butter spreads everybody else,
Yeah.
and then if you were an owner who's renting, you would immediately pass that in your rent. I mean, you wouldn't absorb that.
Mike?
This residential exemption idea could have some pretty massive impacts on some of these categories. It's going to pick up the difference. And I would strongly recommend that if this is pursued, that there should be at least one well-advertised public hearing so that these people are going to be affected by this have the right to say something and not complain about it later on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of this being
I'm just
considered.
early warning.
Yeah. I'm not aware of this being considered by the select board, but when I saw this, I didn't even know it existed. And I thought we should all at least know it exists.
What is the average homeowner in Milford paying for residential property?
I'm glad you brought that up because I have a question on this.
One more question on this, if you could. Can the selectmen just do that at their whim?
Every year when we set the tax rate, these have to be considered before we can set the tax rate.
Okay, so they can just vote to do it?
They could vote to do it, yep, and we try to prepare them and give them, enough information. We give them the packet a week in advance. If they want a refresher, they come in. Mike always comes in. Is he still here? No? He always comes in ahead of time to, just get...
Just a yea or nay vote?
Yeah, just to get a feel for what do these numbers look like? Is it basically the same as what my understanding was the
That's a
year
big
before?
hammer, isn't it, Mike, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
As a landlord, I don't like the feel of this.
So hold on, let me get to the other question, Alan, and then we can go back. So I'm on page 5, Jen, which is single tax rate calculation.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what confused me here was down below, it says average single-family tax bill, $7,573. But then, if I go 2 pages later,
Yep.
and the 1.58, which I think is about where we are on the shift, 4 lines down, it says average single-family tax bill is $6,585.
Yep, and that's really what it is,
So-
that latter number.
So what's the difference?
The first number is if we had a single rate. People always say, well, what would the tax rate be if we didn't shift it?
The 75 is if we had a single rate, because you were quoting me at 7,500 the other day. I was like, where is that number coming from? It's right here. But that's if we had a single
What
rate.
is the average homeowner paying? Not theoretical, not if we change, today.
Today, the tax rate we just set, based on the average assessed value of a single-family home, $6,585.
Okay, and that's 2
That makes
pages
more
after
sense.
that.
Mr. Chairman, can you get a chance?
Wait a minute. Al, did I answer your question?
And the average homeowner value is $514,500. Okay, thank you.
David?
So this is going to jump ahead a little bit, but I am curious about the accessory dwelling. Is that what it's called now? The people that you can build an in-law or whatever apartment. How is that going to affect this? And is it going to be considered a two-family? And the reason why I ask is because I'm surprised the two-family tax rate burden is less than the single.
Well, that's going to be based on the average assessed value, same tax rate.
I'm sorry, the rate, but the value, you're right. The bill. I should say the bill.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised that the bill's less than the single family for a two-family versus a single, just because it's income producing rather than.
Is it the same?
Yeah, so I'll tell you right up that a two-family isn't going to get the income approach to value. We're not looking at income on a two-family.
Oh, you're not?
No.
You're looking at the assessed value?
Looking at sales comparison, yeah.
Ooh.
So there's
Got it.
that.
I got that, right.
But as far as the accessory dwelling, and is it a two-family or not, that's a
Right.
land use question for building more than it is for us. We're going to assess it based on what's there. So we're going to assess, for example, we're going to call it a single-family with additional finished area and a second unit, which is very different. So how what we talk about and how they define it is a little different.
If enough people do it, do you think it'll be shifting at all? Do you think, like, it'll help people that don't have it?
Okay, so, hi.
That would add new growth, so that would be, if someone builds an accessory dwelling unit, that would add 80 or 100,000 of new growth, so that tax would get picked up in the new growth number.
Oh, sure, if they
So
finish
it's not going to be
that, yeah.
spread out to other people, it's not going to help other people's tax rate.
Thank you.
Any other questions besides David?
Shut his mic off.
Well, that was a good question. Absolutely.
Thank you for coming in, Jen.
I'll send you guys some information.
This is great stuff.
This is great.
I'd like to get this every year.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Have a great night. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Excellent.
Never seen any of this.
One page.
There's good stuff, yeah.
Uh-oh.
And we should see it. We should know what the hell it is.
I've never heard some of this stuff.
One page.
So,
Oh, Madon.
so the closed caption, that's, that was an agenda item, but.
Yeah, but if it came here, it would be having gone through. So let me ask you a question.
Yes, I agree. Okay. Hi, guys.
Back in action.
Tom Brown, Leanne, town accountant. She's like, I already know this. Okay. I had suggested that our accounting folks just give us a little extra information on some of the provisions of the 24 financial statements. I know there were a few pages I had a particular interest in. I don't know what you've carved out of this. You have your own. Why don't I let you guys drive?
Yeah.
You drive. Go ahead.
And actually, I didn't envision this at first, but this might be perfect for following that investment presentation. So I could kind of take some of those numbers full circle for you now.
These are pages from the Red Book.
These are pages from the Red Book, so someone like you and Jerry are quite familiar with it, so you could play Candy Crush too while we go over here.
What'd you say about Andy?
Candy Crush on your phone. All right, so let's actually work, you know what, real quick, the front page here is, I work with this full entire book to complete this front page. This is the combined balance sheet of all funds. So one of the reasons I wanted to go over this, we spend as a FinCom and Selectmen and even us a tremendous amount of time putting together the operational budget, and we should. That's a very, very important amount. However, that's not it. There's a lot of other action, a lot of other financing that comes through this town, and I'm not sure anyone realizes how really big that is. So I wanted to go over some of it, how to kind of navigate through it, and so you can
Well, the reason I asked this question is, you know, like this chapter, is it 90 for the highway aid?
Chapter 90. Yeah.
I didn't even know that number was out there. We
Yeah.
always talk about how much are we giving for roads for public
Yeah.
works each year. Is it 600 or 700,000? Okay, well, is there other money sloshing around?
Yes. And the answer is yes. I think as a FinCom, the other one you hear all the time, which is just one, that's one fund, this will be two funds, general fund 3. The other one is school choice.
School choice,
Right?
always,
Yes.
always.
We always talk about school choice. However, literally, we have about 390 other funds. 390. We have about 400 funds on the books. A lot of them might be tiny gift accounts with $20 in it here and there, but there's some big mammoth ones too. So everything I do at the end of the year is to work backward into this combined balance sheet, make sure it balances, you know, everything else ties out. This is what gets submitted to the Department of Revenue. Before I can even certify free cash, they go through all of this, and it's a tremendous amount of work.
Scanlon certifies this, right?
Well, they do there, so I don't put fixed that. You're not going to find fixed assets on here. You're not going to find that OPEB liability on here. So Scanlon's doing more of those, making sure we're in accordance with GASB. You know, that's what he's doing. So it looks drastically different than this. Okay, it's broken out in a different format that's quite involved, put it that way. But what I'd like to do quickly is stop backward. All right, and so you know, that is how I operate when I'm putting this book together. I start from the very back and move forward until it's reconciled and keep trucking away. But as I mentioned right out of the gate, It's actually good that we couple this together with the investment. So you just heard numbers, where's this 52?
52 million, that was my
Right.
question. Where are those accounts?
Bottom page here, so most of those big stabilization explanation you just heard from the market investment firm are these accounts right here. You heard Chris say the
I'm sorry, what
insurance.
page are you on, Zach?
E2.
Very last page.
Very last
Very
page.
last page,
Very last
okay.
page, E2.
Okay.
Does that go with the 55
Yep.
balance?
Yes, sir. Yep.
But, okay, should I ask it why the discrepancy?
Yeah, hang tight. I got you. Let me cook you. All right. So 2, you have your A, B, C, D, E. E is representing trust. Your 2, E2, is representing your change in fund balance. So your actual revenues and your actual expenditures filtering through your beginning balance of your fund. Now you have your ending balance. That will roll into E1, which will be purely balance sheet items. Staying on E2, just because we had that presentation of the investment firm, 81s represent our non-expendable trusts. You heard Chris say, that's our cemetery, perpetual cares, and items like that. Yes, it is. There's a lot of people like donating to cemeteries, dogs. No one wants to give money to the accounting people. Trust me. There's no gift accounts for everybody. There's a lot of trusts for different items, none for us. So, the non-expendable is exactly that. These are like irrevocable trusts. The money goes in. It does not come out, but we are allowed to expend the interest. So that's that next section, the 82 series, expendable trust. That's the interest that's been earned over the years. One of which, we have a perpetual care account called Avis Pond. Forever, I thought there was a pond in Milford called Avis, but it's not. It was a person that donated this money to the town, like literally 80, 90 years ago, $350K for cemetery perpetual care. That's been invested so long that the interest is bigger than the principal at this point, right? So that's kind of the classic example of our expendable trust. Then we have stabilization. We all know what stabilization is. That's another fund everyone's familiar with that we talk about. Moving over to the 84s, that's our claims trust. So we are, we're self-insured for everything except for health insurance. This claims trust is more like an agency account, so that's where all the deductions from every single person in town is filtering through this account. Then our
Zach,
OPEB.
we
Yes, sir.
have a deductible though, right? When you say we're self-insured, if the town hall burnt down,
Yeah, so we do carry like catastrophic insurance
Right.
supplemental plans, but
I know a lot of people ask the question, if we end up with a $10 or $20 million claim, do we have to eat it all?
we are statutorily limited for most all activity to $100,000. We just talked about this earlier. However, there could be exposure for like the tort situation.
As long as there's no tort involved, right?
Yeah.
Two different things.
Yeah. Well, we're self-insured on both. We're self-insured on liability, we're self-insured on property too. But Mass General Law limits the majority of,
But follow up to Al's question, what is our deductible? What's our exposure?
Is it still $250,000
Or is it,
you'd have to get the attorneys out here. I'm not sure. I would be spitballing.
I remember, it's like 2.5 million, isn't it?
I suspect it's a seven-figure number.
What's that?
I suspect it's a seven-figure
Yeah.
number.
Because I remember going through this with Jerry Moody quite a while back, and it's not an insignificant figure. It's not a couple $100,000. It'll.
couple million?
Oh, I think it's 2.5, but don't,
Okay.
I mean, we did that a long time ago.
Separate instances. One is if they sue you for something as a town.
That's our liability claims trust, and for the most part, it's limited to $100,000. That fund has been pretty good there. As you can see, the combined two are about $8 million. Our other self-insured is public building and property. So a police cruiser gets in an accident, they happen to clip a tree or something like that. It's our fault. We pay for it. Same situation. Cruiser hits somebody else. That might be our liability claim, right?
$100,000 if somebody sues you for negligence as a town official.
We're not covered by that. Different law.
So what is 100,000?
Different statute. But I have a question.
Statutory limitation, and if you want to hear deeper, I suggest bringing the attorneys out.
I have a more basic question. How can we have revenues of $7.6 million on the claims trust? If
It
there's a
should
fund
really
balance?
be an agency fund. This is money coming in from withheld from the entire town, and then it goes right back out.
I see.
It's really an agency. It's just-
So just a technical question here, please. We had an incident where we incurred about $100,000 in expenses to fix a fire truck. How do we pay for that?
We went to town meeting.
We pay for that.
No, you went to town meeting, could that have come out of this fund here?
It could have, however, the selectmen have adopted a policy where if it's our own fault, then we're not going to use the.
I asked the same question when that came up, and they said it wasn't, yeah.
We said if we take it out of the insurance fund, you're just going to come back to replenish the insurance fund.
Yes.
There was funds available.
If we didn't have funds available, that would be a different issue. But I remember discussing it, saying, if we take it out of the self-insured fund, next town meeting, you're coming back to replenish it.
Yeah.
You don't have to in the same year, do you? No, you don't. No, you
you
don't.
wouldn't.
You just lower the balance by 100,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't have to.
So
You
what's,
don't have to, but you would.
what's the difference between the claims trust and the insurance fund?
The claims trust is the health insurance, is our health insurance. It really should be an
The
agency.
insurance fund is for health insurance?
No,
Oh, the insurance fund.
Insurance fund are two self-insured liability and public building and property.
Okay, and the claims,
Claims trust is the employees' withholdings for their health portion of the health insurance program. Then they pay that to Blue Cross, they pay that to our providers out there.
That's misleading, because that's a gazinta gazauda.
That's what he said.
Yeah, it really should be an agency fund, is what I'm saying. Agency meaning other people's
So
money.
as a policy decision, we had the money to pay for that loss, but we didn't, it was a policy decision.
Yes. Yes.
So what you did is, in essence, you had the money in a claims account, and you just had the taxpayer pay for it.
Well, it's a taxpayer's
Taxpayer
money.
pays it away.
Either way, it's a taxpayer's money.
Yes.
You had the taxpayer pay for it now versus in the future.
But you didn't.
The real issue is we had $1 million piece of equipment on the sidelines while we waited for the process. We would have paid for it one way or the other.
Right.
One way or the
oh,
other.
the question that Jerry's really asking is what is the appropriate amount of the reserve in the account?
No, my question is,
It's an accountability
that
issue.
decision impacted the tax rate, because it came directly, it was expensed during that year at town meeting.
It was out of free cash, so it probably didn't.
It's still tax rate, okay? It came out of somebody's
So it's the
pocket.
money that goes into the trust fund.
No, my point is, if it was going to otherwise come out of this XYZ fund, and the XYZ fund has 400,000, and somebody says, we don't want that to go below 400,000, well then, if you take the 100 out, then you're going to end up going.
But we have 7,962,000.
I'm at the 7.692,
Seven
It's a
point-
wash and liability, or whatever.
right? That's it. The 7.692.
I really
That comes in and
I really
goes
find
out.
this to be very interesting, because I think our decision from this committee might have been different had we known all this information.
I mean, it's a fair question of, from a policy perspective, is there an objective to keep certain amounts, and what's the basis for the amounts, right? Because I agree that you don't want to keep large amounts unnecessarily. So the question is any analysis gone into that?
But the other thing is, I, as a taxpayer and a member of this committee for 40 years, don't want to just see the expense structure hit unnecessarily, okay? We didn't really need to take that hit. The next time it could be 500,000, and that's where the money should come out of, not put on the tax rate.
There's other details that went into this decision that's not going to be discussed here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Paul, did you?
Yeah, so when they established these funds over probably close to almost 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, the purpose of it was to almost have something that would be self-funding, so that the amount of interest or investment income earned by those two accounts, and I think the theory was it would not drop below $5 million 10 or 15 years ago, would be enough to generate at, let's say, 5%, it would generate $250,000 in interest, which would be enough to pay some of these types of property damage without adding any further burden to the taxpayer.
I mean, are
So
they
it's
self-funding?
one of those self-funding mechanisms.
No, but I mean, to his point,
No, it hadn't been. That's why, if you recall, we put an additional $2.5 million in a couple of years ago when we had the free cash. And if you remember, we upped the annual contribution from $87,000 to $350,000.
But it covers more, like if a cruiser gets hit, our fault, and it's $20,000 damage. The interest may cover that.
Oh, that's the desire here.
That's the- that's the
But we
plan.
also, out of this account, pay supplemental policies as well from this account.
But if it's $100,000, we're not there yet.
All right, so let's move on. What's the next thing you want to show us?
Yeah, okay, so just then we'll just keep flipping forward. So then your E1 is purely your balance sheet, okay? Kind of the numbers from the bottom, not a lot of activity here. This is the cash, this is the fund balance. All of these trusts then put into a total and they move forward to the combined financial statement. All right, so flipping forward.
Does this tie into the 52 million?
Yeah, so basically take out your OPEB balance there and you're right there.
So that was as of November, too, though, you have to remember. The 52 was as of...
You're at market value. I'm not going to be able to show you an exact reconciliation on this, but it's legit.
I'm not worried about it. I just want to understand their 52 million is our two stabilization accounts.
It's about 6 different accounts, 6 different
Okay,
accounts.
because
The two stabilizations are only like,
Three stabilization, sewer, short-term, long-term, the 2 municipal.
that's like $40
accounts.
million, isn't it? The three accounts, like 40 million or
Yeah,
more.
but if you take out the OPEB, your list says 50, they said 52.
I list
I don't know how-
60.
Huh?
I list says 60.
But take out the 11 for OPEB.
That's 50, it takes it down to
You're at
50.
50, they said 52. I don't know how much closer you're going to get.
And theirs is market value, this is not market value.
This is June 30th, and theirs is November
30th
30th.
November, yeah.
No, I'm just,
Yeah.
D2 represents our enterprise funds. We have sewer, now we have water. Same concept, I won't go too detailed because we talk about these ones all the time.
I put one of each of them in there,
Thank
for
you,
water
Tom.
and sewer,
Yep.
so you can see both.
Are there two enterprise funds for water? Stabilization accounts, I'm sorry.
Do we have one now? Do we have a stabilization for water?
You have two of them like
Didn't
we
we
do
just
with the
approve an
sewer.
We
article?
just approved it. Hasn't been funded, but we approved the setup.
You did, okay.
Yes.
Shell is there.
Yes, it's there.
We voted
We're
on
not
the
ready to
shell.
transfer just yet, but retained earnings is starting to build up pretty good. That's why we set it up, which was the objective the entire time.
did you say two stabilizations for the water company?
No.
Or one?
One.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing in it yet, but one. We established
And then
it.
two, sewer and
I
water.
think that's.
Sewer, okay, yeah, I understand sewer, that's been around for a while.
Yeah, we have one with the sewer, and we just added the water. Yep.
Okay.
All right, so I won't spend a bunch of time here. We all know the enterprise fund.
It'd still be two stabilization accounts.
Yes, two separate
Right, right,
stabilization
yeah.
accounts. Yep.
Yeah, you're not going to meld them
Yep.
together.
Keep flipping backwards so you get to C2.
E2, E2 or?
C2. Combined statement of revenues, expenses, and change of fund balance for capital projects, okay? So, two ways, the ways that these occur. We go to town meeting, we get an appropriation. If we're gonna do the $100,000, we'll stick on that theme to repair the fire truck. I'm not gonna set that up as a capital project. That's kind of a one and done, even if there's 6 or 7 expenses against it, fine. That's gonna be an article that you all see when you get the expense reports. It's set up as an article. If I have a project like the pool project, or certainly this school project that you guys just met on earlier, then I'm going to set that up as its own separate fund. I will do that because I will likely have other revenue than just taxation. That might be a bond. That might be a large grant, AKA the MSBA, right? That might be me having to do a bond anticipation note while we're waiting for the debt to come in. So in order to do it effectively, we have to have a whole fund with its own income statement, its own balance sheet. So that's where these capital projects come into play. They begin with a 4O, so 40XX. So when you're flipping through your red book with more detail and you're looking at them, that's what those are. They're large capital projects that might span multiple years, and likely the trigger of having me establish it as a capital project versus an article is the likelihood of bonding or other revenue that needs to come in.
Zach, do you have one per project, or is it just a summation?
Nope,
You have
one per project, yep. Right now, there's like 20 of them outstanding, something like that.
Like the town park or something?
Yep, Town Park is one, yep. That goes for sewer, the enterprise funds too. Anytime you have.
Does, huh?
Yes.
Field pond.
Yep, field pond,
Yeah,
yep,
yeah,
field
yeah,
pond is
yeah.
set up in here. Yep, exactly. Same thing when you go to C1, now it's just the balance sheet. You can see I have $11 million in capital projects right now that's set up as a separate fund. Working backwards, this gets pretty busy here. Special revenue funds, okay? School lunch, 22 series, a lot of money gets filtered through school lunch. And you can see we're starting to build up a pretty big balance. I don't know what we're gonna do with it. You know, this is like 5 years ago, you're teetering around zero. We got $2 million in this account right now, and it's quite odd. It's I guess, a good problem to have. But
What should we do with it?
yeah, I don't
million
know.
dollars?
I don't know. I gotta.
I mean, you
Ask the
can't,
school committee.
Yes, yes, Mike, you should remember this when you come up with the budget review now.
is it restricted?
Oh, yes, definitely.
In other words, the grant,
Unless they're planning on like some massive repair, you know, which you can do.
there's a federal receipts of $3,500,000.
That traveling cart thing.
They
how much
just
was
bought
that?
They just bought a portable cart that didn't look too elaborate to me, but it was $32,000.
Does it have a heater and?
We're talking tens of thousands of dollars expensive.
But they bought a big new freezer 2 years ago.
And they use this account?
Yeah, one of the reasons for this now is, like, you can see, federal receipts, 3.5 million are getting from the feds now. It's crazy.
Some of that money when they were feeding kids during
Likely, yes. Yeah.
But I still think
They still are, I mean,
they're not paying. Kids aren't paying, right?
No.
but I'd say the number of lunches have probably gone up exponentially year on year.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It looks like you got $3,700,000, and the interest is only $15?
They have a small account that has that in there. Yeah, that's not on the entire thing here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's getting in the weeds on it. Just trust me
School
on that
lunch is
one.
totally separate from choice ed account?
Yep.
It's bigger than choice ed account.
Totally separate.
Choice in account is negative.
This is the one.
Getting there.
Continuing, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
going across to the right, 2,300. This is what you referenced as Chapter 90.
Yes, it
That's
is.
your Chapter 90 fund.
That's the 7.25, yeah.
Okay? Revolving funds, this is the summary of all revolving funds. Again, I would ask you to, in your free time when you want to go to bed, look through the red book. That makes up revolving funds is probably, like 30 different funds there. The most notable is probably school choice that everyone is familiar with.
School choice is in this.
School choice is in here, yup, it's a revolving fund. Most of these 24s had a statute that at one time or another had to have been adopted by town meeting to set these up.
Let me step back a minute. Is school lunch, is that not revolving?
It is. I just have it as its own code because it's so restrictive, but yes, it technically is, yes.
Zach, are all the revolving accounts still active?
Yes.
Are they really?
Yep. Yep.
State and federal grants, 25.
To continue on that with the 24 here, right? So it has to have a statute, it had to have been adopted. These have been going back a long, long time. All the ones that are there have been adopted. Now, it's important to acknowledge this piece here. Absent having that avenue, that law that says we can adopt it and I can set this money separately, all monies brought into the town are general fund. So when funds come up, you have departments all the time, oh, I brought in all this money, can I use it? No, go to the general fund. You know, you got a statute? Nope, go to the general fund. You know, so absent having these statutes, which there are a whole bunch of them, and we do indeed have them, to the tune of, there's $7 million that came into these revolving funds last year. So there's a whole handful of them. They get tracked separately. And yeah, it's a lot. And as you can see with the expenditures, I break it out per major governmental unit: general government, public safety, education, public works, human services, and they're all pretty diverse throughout them. So it's not like this is just school department, although as we go through this, the majority of the funds are school, so you know, the majority are school. But they don't have to be.
Is that police detail?
Yes. Yep. Police detail is in here. That's over $1 million a year. Yep, it is.
State and federal grants?
Moving on to state and federal grants. Yep, those are all under Chapter 44, Section 53A. Again, a statute that allows me to establish these. This has come up in the past with this committee. They can be expended without further appropriation through the Board of Selectmen or the necessary department, the authorized department that achieved, that was awarded the grant. So town meeting action is not necessary there. And a lot of money in grants come into this town too. All right, so there's almost 8 million there. The school has probably 40 grants between Fed and state. In this case, federal receipts were $5.2 million. State receipts.
Schools have the same authority as the select board.
Yes, so in that case, school committee.
School committee can take the same action as the municipal side.
That's correct, Dub. Yep.
Check.
Same breakout, so on and so forth. Special revenue 26s. These are our gifts and what we call receipts reserved for appropriation. So there are funds that we have on the books that cannot be expended through the selectmen or through the school committee, but do require town meeting action. Okay, there's not a lot of them, but we do have them.
Like what?
Sale of lots for cemetery, you know, stuff.
Friends of the library goes in here?
No, friends of anything should not be on my books. You know, they're not. They're not. I don't even want to hear it. Yeah, I don't even like talking about it.
Sorry, I didn't make them.
Yeah.
Those are unfriendly.
Yeah, they're unfriendly to me. Yeah.
Okay. Never mind.
But these are where your gifts come in, right? So people donate to the town, and a lot of times it's specific purposes. If it is a specific purpose, that tells me I have to set up a fund for that. You know, a lot of times donations will come to library. If it doesn't have a specific purpose, I have a generic library fund. Boom, goes in there. But if on that check it says, oh, for use of children's books only, all right, I gotta set up a whole new fund, you know, and I gotta make, and I gotta make sure that it is indeed for children's books only.
We just had one.
Did you?
Remember the Quintella?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Have you finished reading it, or? Have you finished reading that book?
No. Numbers guy for a reason. So if you're moving on, 27 there, very small dollars. This is money left over from when we had CDBG. All right.
Had what?
Community Development Block Grant.
But why is it still there? We never used it?
Kind of. That's the heck you call it? The program. It's a recapture agreement. So if part of when Sue Clark was doing these, she put like a new roof on someone's house, and then they sold their house 5 years in through the attorney, like closing it, would have to do a recapture back to the town.
But there's 100,000 there. What could it be used for?
We just went to the selectmen to move it over to that parks project.
Okay.
Yep, the town park. Because it has to either be coupled with other CDBG money, and this is the first time we've had it in, 8, 9, 10 years. Seems like the only opportunity to use it. So,
That's good to know.
yeah. All right, moving on. We'll get to the A's.
So when we get that proposal for the May finishing of the town project. We got to remember, keep that one or two in mind.
I
Okay.
gotcha.
Keep that in the back in your pocket?
Source of funding.
Yeah. When you get to A2, now we're back to general fund. This is the whole general fund, all the revenue we took in per category. This is what Paul and I put together for the tax recap, and we work with Jan, and it all kind of flows together from here. The breakout per major government unit is our budget totals. So when you see your budget plus your articles, that all filters through this number, and then it comes down to our end of year balance, which is also known as your quote unquote undesignated fund balance. That's what's the derivative of our free cash number.
And this number is 143 million, but our budget is like 160. What's the difference, the enterprise funds? Or?
What are you looking at? That's revenue.
I'm half.
That's
yeah.
revenue.
Well, the revenue, 143 million, but what were you hiring? What am I thinking, 160 million?
160.
With the enterprise funds, yes, you had it
The
right.
enterprise
Yes,
funds,
yes,
okay.
yes, you had it right.
General funds.
Yes, you had it right. Yep.
Okay.
Same exact concept, flips forward. Now it's your balance sheet. All right. You have a certain amount of cash. General fund is sitting on 28 million in cash. We have outstanding receivables, property taxes, liens, foreclosures, so on and so forth. We also have our liabilities. Again, I don't have the pension liabilities not on my books. That's the combined from the auditor. The OPEB's not on here, combined from the auditor. Likewise with...
The pension fund separate of...
I'm sorry?
Isn't the pension fund separate of the operating?
Yes, 100%.
So it's-
But it does go on the towns because it's a direct liability. It is now on the town's audited financial statement.
Okay.
Lastly, it will trickle through, finally, to the combined balance sheet.
Is this page one?
Page one, yep. Combined balance sheet by major class, every one of them. Again, a lot, this is the more simplistic version here that we just went over. All the backup data filters through this book, the red book, which we distribute out. It's a lot of work, all 400 funds filtered through, and as you can see, we do indeed balance. Obviously, the Department of Revenue Review is looking at that, and we also have to certify on the various receivables and liabilities. I sign off, Chris Pillis signs off, Tom signs off, collector signs off. So there's a lot of checks and balances here for the Department of Revenue to go, okay, this seems reasonable, you know what you're doing, we'll certify your free cash. And then on top of it, we have the annual audit every year that kind of blesses the numbers I have put together too. I know that was a tremendous amount. You know?
Oh, it's very helpful.
It's excellent. Very good. I just,
This every year, too.
excuse me?
We should go through this exercise.
Oh, yeah, I know. Instead of taking...
Easy.
There's a lot of things behind the curtain that
We're just
we
trying
don't...
to teach you how to go to the Red Book.
I already sent it to you.
I'm listening.
The 18 references to the Red Book. 6 of the Red Book.
Thank you guys for that.
Well.
Did we want to talk for 5
Just
minutes?
call it quits today.
You've had enough? Yeah. I'm fine. I tend to agree. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Motion?
Thank you very much.
Motion by Al to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Bob. We have our Zoom folks. Lauren? Joyce?
My brain is fried.
Thank you. Grant?
You figured it all out?
Yes. Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.